This is Alfred Hitchcock speaking.
Hello everybody, I am DB, welcome to another ranking video, and today I'm tackling the massive body of work of the master of suspense himself, the legend, Sir Alfred Hitchcock. I've watched every single one of Hitchcock's 53 surviving feature films, from his silent films of the 20s, his early British movies of the 30s, all the way to his incredible breakthrough into Hollywood during the 40s, and his absolutely immortal classics during the 50s and 60s. And now, I'm gonna rank them all. So join me in this retrospective look at one of cinema's greatest ever directors. And of course, I gotta say this is my list. It's not an objective list, it's just my opinion. Didn't think this needed to be said, I kinda thought this was self-evident, but apparently some people didn't get the memo for the Spielberg ranking, so here's a little disclaimer for you. Before we begin, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. I really appreciate it. Alright, so now with all the formalities out of the way, let's do this. This is every single Alfred Hitchcock film, ranked from worst to best. Number 53. Juno and the Paycock. This is widely regarded as a disaster and one of Hitchcock's worst ever films, and you won't find any disagreement from me. Juno and the Paycock was torture. It's the one and only Hitchcock film that I don't think anybody should watch, ever. Barely anything happens throughout the entirety of the movie. It was slow, cumbersome, and dull. The plot largely takes place in a single setting, the family's apartment, but the film doesn't do anything special or interesting with it. The story moves at a snail's pace, and the characters don't really change or develop, they stay the same. Only near the very end do things actually start to happen, but it was far too late at that point. I was already bored out of my mind for 90 minutes prior, so the ending meant nothing. The only good thing I can say about this film is that it has a distinct Irish charm to it. Too bad that charm is wasted on such a bad movie. Juno and the Paycock, to me, is Alfred Hitchcock's worst film. Number 52. The Pleasure Garden. Hitchcock's directorial debut is definitely a film that I will not be revisiting anytime soon. It barely showcases what this legendary director would later be known for. The story is about two chorus girls at the Pleasure Garden Theatre in London, and it's about as interesting as it sounds. It's obvious that Hitchcock was taking his very first steps as a director with this silent film, because save for the last 10 minutes, this film doesn't feel like a Hitchcock film at all. Only at the very end we see some Hitchcockian things going on, like a man drowning a woman at sea, only for her ghostly apparition to come back and haunt him and drive him to kill his wife. That was the very first sign of the Hitchcock we know today. But it's not enough to make this film worth your time, not even a little bit. The only reason people know this film even exists is because of the incredible career its director would go on to have. But by itself, The Pleasure Garden simply doesn't hold up. For completionists only. Number 51. Downhill. This shouldn't shock anyone, but you can expect Hitchcock's really early work to be relatively low on the list. This is yet another early silent feature from Hitchcock, and just like The Pleasure Garden, it didn't really do it for me. The film takes a really long time to get going. It takes almost half an hour for anything substantial to actually happen, and for the first bit of drama to occur. Which is already a long time, but when it comes to a silent film, it practically feels like forever. The story is about a man who's falsely accused of something. It was kind of hard to understand at first, but it's a serious charge and it destroys his life. Ivor Novello plays the main character, Roddy, and he did a decent job here, but nothing too special. He was much more memorable in a different silent film Hitchcock directed, but we'll get to that. Downhill has the edge over The Pleasure Garden because it does have some nice cinematography in it, some slightly funny moments, and some creative moments as well. My favorite was a scene where we see Roddy wait a table at a restaurant, only for the camera to reveal that it's actually a stage play and he's a background dancer. That was pretty nice, but it doesn't get much better than that. I did find it kinda hilarious that except for his mother, all of the women in his life are scumbags. Was Hitchcock going through something at the time? I don't know. Anyway, Downhill wasn't anything too special. The story was disjointed and hard to follow, the characters weren't very interesting, the visuals didn't stand out. Overall, the film is beyond skippable. Number 50. Under Capricorn. One word. Boring. I honestly considered putting this one last because it was easily the dullest, slowest, lamest, most redundant film I've seen in this marathon. At least until about the last 20 minutes. Then things finally started to pick up. A bit, but it was far too late at that point. All throughout the runtime, I was looking at my watch. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, and still, nothing happens. Nothing of substance, nothing of interest, nothing. The main character might as well be a plank of wood, because that character had nothing to offer whatsoever. On a slightly different note, I never expected to see Ingrid Bergman in color. I also never expected to see Ingrid Bergman bore the life out of me. But there it is. Under Capricorn, I'm impressed. Good job. I mean, honestly, up until the last few minutes, the biggest moment of drama that happens throughout the entire film is that someone was slightly rude to Ingrid Bergman. Oh no! This movie really was not my cup of tea. The only thing that keeps this film from the absolute bottom of the list is the cinematography, which was mixed, but that's better than just all-out bad. There were moments in the film where the camera employed the same techniques that Hitchcock used in Rope, which is the film that he made prior, and it's impossible not to be a little bit impressed by that. It's just a shame that here, unlike in Rope, the story and characters were unbearably dull and uninteresting. Not only that, there are other points where the camera just stands still for what seems like hours, while the characters just keep babbling on and on and on and on, and that was very bad. It made the film feel lifeless and stagnant. It was just too much for me. Under Capricorn is a serious disappointment. I didn't like it at all, and it's easily one of Hitchcock's worst films, in my opinion. Number 49. Easy Virtue. Once again, we have a silent film near the bottom of the list. It's a bad sign when reading the plot synopsis on Wikipedia is more rewarding than actually watching the film itself, but that's exactly what I felt with Easy Virtue, a film about a disgraced woman who tries to escape her past by starting a new life for herself. Hitchcock was undeniably a great director, and he would go on to make his mark and stake his claim as a legend of the art form. But that just wasn't the case during the silent era. The majority of his silent movies just weren't that special. Still, he did try to do some interesting things here. The film's opening court scene keeps ping-ponging back and forth between the past and the present through flashbacks, which was an interesting way to convey the information. Also, while the first half of the film was unbearably slow, the second half was actually pretty intriguing, thanks to this power struggle between the main character and her husband's mother. So the film has some things going for it, but it's still pretty bad overall. The cinematography was pretty weak here, and aside from the opening scene, the editing wasn't much better. It also has some unintentionally silly moments in it that I just couldn't ignore, like a moment where she overhears two people talking about her because she's sitting right there. How can you not see her? What are you, blind? Maybe I'm not being fair to the film, but screw it. I've seen all of Hitchcock's silent films, along with plenty of other ones made by far more talented silent filmmakers, and Easy Virtue just isn't up to par. It's one of his weaker silent films, which automatically makes it one of his weaker films in general. Number 48. Rich and Strange. The early 30s were the most inconsistent period in Hitchcock's career, with a few hits but mostly misses. Rich and Strange was definitely a miss. It's about a married couple who go on a massive trip around the world, but during their travels, both the husband and the wife find lovers, and they begin to drift apart. Where do I even begin with this one? I guess you could call it an experimental film, but I don't think the experiment worked. The film's style was pretty wild. There were a bunch of scenes that were done in the style of a silent film, with bombastic musical scores, quick-fire editing, and crazy visuals galore. You even got intertitles in the film. What was that about? I did like the opening scene where we see the husband go home from work. It was entertaining and funny how over-the-top it was, and I assumed that was that, in terms of the craziness. But no, there were several scenes like it throughout the film, and what was at first kind of funny soon became annoying and tiresome. Much like that weird lady with the glasses that kept harassing everybody. Also, the film didn't really have much of a story, and the characters were awful. Fred was super unlikable right from the jump. The way he treats his wife, the way he hits the cat, the way he shoves his wife's dress to the floor. Jeez, dude, get a grip. His wife was much more likable, although she was the first one who cheated, so that doesn't bode well for her. In short, I didn't like this movie. I didn't like the characters, I didn't like the story, which felt weightless and didn't really go anywhere, and I didn't like the visual style, which was way too weird and crazy at certain points. It did have a few funny moments sprinkled throughout, but as a whole, not very good. Number 47. Champagne. Here we're starting to get to the better silent Hitchcock films, although I guess Champagne would be the worst of the best in that case. Regardless, there's definitely a jump in quality with this film as opposed to the previous ones I've talked about. Right off the bat, the film showcases much better visuals than usual. The editing and the cinematography got an upgrade, and the characters are much more fleshed out and clearly defined here, which helped me relate to them more. I really liked the main character in this film, played by Betty Balfour, who was one of the biggest stars of British silent cinema. Here, she was very lively and upbeat. She was also very incompetent and kept making silly mistakes, but she never loses her charm throughout the film. This is easily a much more digestible and fun silent film than the ones lower on the list, and to me that made a big difference, in a good way. The film has a bunch of funny moments in it, and it also does some interesting things visually. I liked the scene where she enters a restaurant on a ship, and we see the waiters swaying from side to side. That was pretty neat. I also liked the way Hitchcock portrays seasickness. So that was all good, but my one big problem with the film is its story. There's really not much to it. The plot meanders a lot and doesn't really go anywhere. The side characters barely have a presence or affect the story at all, and the ending of the film makes everything that happened prior to be kind of pointless. So that's a pretty big drawback that hurts the film, but I still enjoyed myself while watching it, at least more than the films below it. Champagne, much like the drink itself, might be empty and meaningless, but at least it's a good time. Number 46. The Ring. No, not that ring, but that would have been awesome. I'm talking about a boxing ring, and this 1927 silent drama about two boxers fighting for the heart of a woman. Tale as old as time. This is one of Hitchcock's better silent films in my opinion. The cinematography was pretty good. There were a few shots here that caught my eye, like this one where we see their reflections in the water, and I also liked this POV shot after getting punched in the face. That was pretty cool. The film also employs some clever editing tricks in it, which helps keep some visual variety throughout, and I also liked how the film uses a bracelet in a symbolic way. But the best thing I can say about it is that I actually cared about the characters and what was going on. The film stars Lillian Hall Davis as the woman whose affection the two boxers are fighting for. At the time, Alfred Hitchcock referred to her as his favorite actress to work with, and she did a pretty good job here. The other two boxers were great too, and I was actually invested in the story, and I wanted to see who will come out on top, and who the girl will choose in the end. The final fight was grand and climactic, and the last 15 minutes or so were really engrossing as a result. However, at the end of the day, and with all that being said, I don't think the film manages to rise above its limitations. It's slow, plodding, and it has a lot of unnecessary filler. The vast majority of the runtime felt like a waste of time, which is never a good sign. Also, it has some horribly outdated racial stereotypes, so that's not very good. Anyway, The Ring was a decent silent film, but nothing I've never seen before. It was serviceable, but not amazing. Number 45. The Paradine Case. One of the worst Hitchcock films post his jump to Hollywood, this misguided courtroom drama just doesn't work. It's supposed to be about a married lawyer who falls in love with a woman who's accused of murder, but the writing, performances, and chemistry between the characters was so bad or non-existent that the film just fell flat and the stakes felt inconsequential. Gregory Peck was okay-ish. I definitely saw better performances by him in the past. Alida Valli had a few good moments, but for the vast majority of the film, her performance felt monotonic and shallow. Even Charles Laughton, my guy, Captain Bligh himself, couldn't save this movie. He was criminally underused here, barely had any screen time, especially during the first half. But out of all of the underwhelming characters in this film, the worst one was the lawyer's wife, played by Anne Todd. She's jealous and suspects that her husband is falling in love with Mrs. Paradine, so she hates her, but she still wants her to live and win the case because that way her husband won't obsess over her after she dies? What? That is one of the weakest reasonings I've ever heard. Her big dramatic monologue is so bad, she even finishes it by exclaiming out loud, "What a speech!"
What a speech.
Boo! Lame! I don't blame the actress at all, I blame the script. She had nothing to work with. Almost none of the actors had. This was a very weak film, but I will give it some credit. The trial scenes themselves were an improvement over the rest of the movie. We get to see Gregory Peck spew out legal jargon, which we know he's an expert at, to kill a mockingbird, and these are also the scenes where Charles Laughton has the most screen time, which is always a good thing. These scenes also had some of the more creative shots the film had to offer. Unfortunately though, as a whole, it wasn't enough to save the film. It still offers enough to rank it above some of the silent films, but it's definitely one of the few L's Hitchcock has had since making his journey to the States. Number 44. Mary. Honestly, I considered not ranking this film at all, but it's labeled as a Hitchcock movie on IMDb and Wikipedia, so I guess I'm including it. The reason why I had my reservations was because Mary is nothing more than the German language version of another Hitchcock film, Murder. And I don't mean that it's a German remake, I mean that it's exactly the same film, more or less, just with German actors. Hitchcock shot both Murder and Mary simultaneously, using the exact same sets and the exact same camera setups, with only the actors and the language being different. So what was I to do with this? Well, I decided to give it a shot and see if there is anything meaningfully different here. Who knows, maybe Mary changes things just enough to distinguish itself and make it stand out. And maybe it even does some things better than the English version. Well, I checked it out, and no, it doesn't. Murder is the superior version, hands down, and if you've seen it, you have literally no reason to watch Mary. This means that in my opinion, Mary is the most unnecessary Hitchcock film ever made. Literally the only thing worthy of note about it is that it stars Alfred Abel in the lead role, who's most famous for playing in Metropolis, which is one of the greatest silent films ever made. So that's pretty cool, but there's literally nothing else about it. Still, I couldn't rank it lower, because on its own, it's not as bad as the films below it. If you ignore the fact that there's a better version in literally every single way than this one that exists, then Mary is still pretty solid. But Murder does exist, so you literally have no reason to actually check it out. Number 43. The Farmer's Wife. This was easily one of my favorites of Hitchcock's silent films. It's about a farmer who loses his wife and after a period of mourning decides to search for a new one. This is one of the most light-hearted and easygoing silent films I've ever seen. It's also really funny, mostly because of its age. I mean, there are some really amazing quotes in this film. The way the farmer speaks about other women is hilarious, especially during an excellent scene where he writes down a list of names of all of his options. My favorite was, "I don't mind they pillowy women, so long as they be pillowy in the right places." That's priceless. Anyway, he gets rejected by all of his options, which hilariously leads him to having a hissy fit every single time, only to find that the woman of his dreams was under his nose all along in the shape of his housekeeper, Minta, portrayed again by Lillian Hall Davis, in an even better role than she had in The Ring. It's a real shame what happened to her in real life. I'm not gonna get into it in this video because it's so depressing, but I'm glad she is forever immortalized in her great work as a silent actress. Back on topic, The Farmer's Wife may be predictable, but it's also more entertaining than most of Hitchcock's other silent films. The film wasn't particularly well shot or edited, but I did really like the way the film uses the chair next to the fireplace. At first, we see it empty, symbolizing how alone the farmer is, but later when he contemplates who to take as his new wife, he imagines them sitting in the chair, and of course, ultimately, this happens. That was a very nice touch. The Farmer's Wife was funny, silly, lighthearted, and had a bunch of likable characters in it. It's still not much in terms of Hitchcock's entire body of work, but I liked the vibes of this film. As far as his silent films go, this was easily one of his best. Number 42. The Skin Game. A pretty simple film, all things concerned, but it's powered by a fairly entertaining rivalry between two patriarchs, Mr. Hillcrest and Mr. Hornblower. Hillcrest sold Hornblower some land, but he ends up regretting it after seeing how Hornblower handles the land, so he asks him to stop. Hornblower doesn't take too kindly to that, and he swears to make Hillcrest hurt. The rivalry heats up and intensifies all the way to the tragic ending. An entertaining conflict can go a long way, and I think it does here. The rivalry helps the film stand out, especially in regards to Hitchcock's other early work. The interactions between the two characters were great. I loved the trash talk, the brashness, and the animosity. It was straightforward, to the point, and engaging. They keep trying to gain ground, to have something to hold over the other, and it just builds and builds. There's an auction scene where the two spar over a different piece of land, and it was one of the best scenes in any Hitchcock film up to that point. The way the camera keeps whizzing between the bidders was pretty great. The side characters also did a serviceable job, with one in particular serving as the emotional core of the film. The problem with the skin game is that everything I just said doesn't really amount to much, and the viewing experience itself was nothing too special. The visuals weren't that great, the editing was disjointed, and the ending felt rushed. Hitchcock keeps developing his skills here, but the skin game is far from the finished product. Number 41. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Before watching this film, I thought it was gonna be about a married couple who find out they're both assassins and they try to kill each other, but I thought wrong. This Mr. and Mrs. Smith is simply about a married couple who find out that due to a technicality, they're not actually married at all, and the relationship begins to deteriorate as a result. This is Hitchcock's only pure comedy, a screwball comedy at that, and it wasn't very good. As a comedy, it wasn't very funny or memorable, and it pales in comparison to other classic screwball comedies of the era. I don't know if it was the script or the acting, but the film felt very unpleasant, and it just wasn't that fun to watch. I mean, the wife felt really cruel in this film. It was hard for me to relate to her. And it's not as if the husband was perfect or anything, far from it, but the entire plot boils down to the wife getting offended from something the husband does to her, so she decides to completely wreck the relationship in response, even after he begs for her to come back to him. Pretty shitty behavior on her part. The tone of the film felt off. Moments that I felt were pretty serious were played solely for laughs, and it didn't feel very appropriate for me. It's one of Hitchcock's most mean-spirited films for sure, which is ironic because this is his only pure comedy. I thought comedies were supposed to be lighthearted. The film isn't completely terrible. Even though I didn't like the wife, I did like the performance by Carole Lombard. She did a really great job here. This is the last film that was released during her lifetime. She tragically died in a plane crash the following year, at just 33 years of age. The world was robbed of a great actress on that day. The film did have some funny moments in it. I liked the scene where they were stuck on the carnival ride, that was pretty funny. And I also liked the ending. It was kind of forced, but it was funny. And that's what matters. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is far from Hitchcock's best, but I've also seen worse. Number 40. Number 17. This was a very strange one. It's a crime thriller about a bunch of criminals trying to get their hands on a diamond necklace. But good luck understanding that from simply watching the movie. Number 17 elects to not explain almost anything to the audience. It just throws you into the opening scene with two men you don't know, a dead body, and 1,000 questions. For the first 2/3 of the film, I was wondering to myself, who are these people? What are they doing there? What are they looking for? What's going on here? But I allowed myself to just give myself to the movie and watch it. And by the time it ended, everything was explained, and I got answers to all of these questions. So even though the plot was impossible to follow for most of its duration, I still found myself strangely enjoying the film. The film was well acted, well shot, and well edited. The pacing was good, and visually it was more impressive than the films he made previously. It was a step up on that regard. Of course, it still had its fair share of technical issues. There's a fight scene in the film that was really bad. It was unintentionally hilarious, but still bad. Also, I didn't really care for the big ending set piece on the train. Trains are a big part of several Hitchcock films, but in this film, we get one of the lesser examples of that. It's just a bunch of people chasing each other back and forth on a train, all the while we're subjected to a horrendous audio loop that will drive you insane. Stop! Anyway, that's all I have to say about this film, really. It's easily the shortest film Hitchcock has ever directed, clocking in at just over an hour. But he still managed to cram in a compressed and confusing narrative filled with twists and turns, dead bodies, diamonds, and a Hitchcock blonde. It's definitely not a great film, but it was an intriguing early mesh of a bunch of Hitchcock's most common tropes. For that alone, I say, check it out. Number 39. Torn Curtain. Hitchcock's final 5 films, the ones that he made after The Birds, are the definition of a mixed bag. Some are good but not great, some are bad but not terrible, and if judged as a collective, the films aren't that special. Torn Curtain is my least favorite of his post-Birds era films. The plot revolves around a double agent during the Cold War who pretends to defect to the side of the Russians, but things get complicated when his fiancée follows him to Moscow and gets herself involved in the mess. With Paul Newman and Julie Andrews at the lead, I expected way more from this film, but it failed to deliver. I felt like Julie Andrews especially, fresh out of starring in Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, was criminally underused. I think the film could have been much better if the entire story was told from her point of view, but instead she spends most of it on the sidelines and we focus mainly on Paul Newman's character, who delivers a very weak performance by his standards. The plot was a mess, it went all over the place, with characters that we meet for a few scenes and then they disappear forever. That weird woman especially was, well, weird. Didn't really understand what was up with that. I also found the film to be underwhelming on a technical level, an issue that, in fairness, all of Hitchcock's final 5 films have. The cinematography, editing, and direction were nothing to write home about, a massive downgrade from the masterpieces that he just spent the previous 10 years making. There's a scene in the film where a character gets stabbed, and even though we see it all with the blood and everything, it wasn't nearly as effective as the stabbing scene in Psycho, for example. Ultimately, I just think Hitchcock's heart wasn't in this one, unfortunately. There were a few good scenes in the film, like the scene with the chalkboard. I liked that scene a lot, and there were a couple others here and there, but they didn't gel together in my opinion. In short, Torn Curtain, though it had some promise, is far from Hitchcock's best. Number 38. Topaz. Another one of Hitchcock's final few films, Topaz ranks just above Torn Curtain for me, only because I slightly cared about the characters more in this one. But even that, not by much. And Topaz is yet another mediocre Hitchcock film that doesn't showcase the best of his talents. Just like Torn Curtain, this is yet another Cold War thriller, this time about a French spy trying to uncover the Soviet Union's plots in Cuba. All of the actors here are relative unknowns. Probably the most familiar face here is John Forsythe, who also played in another Hitchcock film prior to this one, The Trouble with Harry. The actors did a serviceable job, but I don't think the script really gave them much to work with. The plot is all over the place. Characters show up and are cast aside way too quickly, and the film overall just lacked energy and urgency. It was slow and boring for the most part, which is never a good thing. Honestly, it was kinda sad to watch at times, especially near the end. The film becomes way too stagnant. People just stand and talk to each other, and the camera doesn't do anything interesting. Still, a few good scenes and a few good performances, and some characters that were pretty likable, make sure the film isn't a total waste. I liked Frederick Stafford in the leading role, and also Karen Dorr as his sexy Cuban love interest, fresh off her role as a Bond girl in You Only Live Twice. There are a few suspenseful scenes of espionage sprinkled throughout the film that were pretty effective, so the film has its moments, but it's definitely not one of Hitchcock's best. It does have one of his funniest cameos, though. I'll give it that. Number 37. Saboteur. Not to be confused with Sabotage, which is a different Hitchcock movie that we'll get to later. Saboteur is one of Hitchcock's most generic films, in my opinion. It's a movie where the common Hitchcock tropes are laid bare in a very basic and relatively uninspired fashion. Oh look, another Hitchcock movie about a man who's wrongfully accused of a crime he did not commit. Where have I seen that one before? Oh, that's right, everywhere. The setup for the plot felt pretty lame, and the fact that the acting in this film was relatively subpar also didn't help much. With that being said though, Saboteur still has some enjoyable elements to it. I like the scene where we're introduced to the main villain. I thought that scene was well executed and it established the villain as a menacing yet gentlemanly figure. I also liked Priscilla Lane's character. She did a good job in her role. There were a bunch of colorful characters in this movie, and I enjoyed most of them. The film is also way more action-packed than most of Hitchcock's other films. You get multiple chase scenes here, my favorite one being a scene where our hero literally gets lassoed off of a horse. That's awesome. Saboteur is a love story, a spy story, a fugitive story, and an underground criminal organization story all rolled into one. So at best, I can say that this film has a lot going on in it. The problem is that the film tends to lose focus and the plot gets really messy and confusing, especially near the end. By the end, I found it hard to understand what was going on. What was the terrorists' plan? Who even are these people? What the hell is happening here? I don't even understand what's happening here. And finally, the ending is one of the most unintentionally hilarious moments in Hitchcock's filmography. Sorry. In short, Saboteur is a mixed bag of a film, which reflects its spot on the list. Number 36. The Manxman. Hitchcock's final silent film was also one of his very best. It tells a story about a toxic love triangle between Pete the fisherman, his best friend Philip, and Kate, a beautiful woman portrayed by Annie Andra. Kate loves Philip, but she promises herself to Pete before he leaves on a journey to make his fortune. After receiving the news of Pete's death, she and Philip immediately hit it off. Like, super quick. They didn't even mourn or anything, it was wild. But of course, Pete isn't dead, and when he comes back, he marries Kate, and she and Philip keep their secret to themselves. This leads to a very awkward and uncomfortable dynamic between the three individuals, which kept the story interesting all the way through. I wanted to see how things would turn out. All three characters were very strong here, they were all well written and fleshed out. Pete was way too good in this film. His heart was truly made of gold. Kate treats him really badly because she isn't really in love with him. She does some really awful things in this movie, but he keeps on forgiving her and he was still willing to take her back all the way till the very end. Dude, if I was you, I'd dump that broad yesterday. Philip was also pretty great here. Sure, he betrayed his best friend, but you could see that he regrets it and feels bad, and by the end he accepts the price he has to pay. On technical terms, the film is one of Hitchcock's best-looking silent movies. The cinematography was great, taking full advantage of the diverse scenery the Isle of Man has to offer. It also incorporates some creative blocking during certain scenes. If I had to pick one issue I had with the movie, is that the film was kind of repetitive and it dragged a bit during the middle. There's a pretty large portion of the film where the characters don't really change. Pete is gullible, Kate is depressed, and Philip is stuck between his lust and his loyalty, and they kinda just stay like that for a long time. That was pretty bad, and also, of course, it suffers from the usual limitations of silent cinema at the time. But overall, The Manxman was a definite highlight of Hitchcock's silent era. Number 35. Jamaica Inn. This is the final film Hitchcock directed before his big jump to Hollywood, and in my opinion, it's a mixed bag, middle-of-the-road movie. It's not bad, but it's far from a classic. The story takes place in the early 1800s, and is about a woman who goes to meet her aunt in the titular inn, only to find herself embroiled in a conspiracy regarding a violent criminal gang headed by her aunt's husband. It's well shot, well acted, and it has a few good sequences in it, like a scene where the woman helps a man escape the gang, as well as a great scene where we find out the truth about the man she helped escape. But overall, the story and the characters just didn't do it for me. I felt like the film took itself too seriously at parts. The majority of the runtime has a brooding atmosphere to it that didn't really work, and that led to a viewing experience that wasn't particularly enjoyable. That being said, there was an exception to all of this, and that was Charles Laughton. He plays the pompous and over-the-top Sir Humphrey Pengallan, and he was highly enjoyable every time he was on screen. Charles Laughton delivered a very entertaining performance, and his scenes were the best scenes in the film by far. He was funny when he needed to be, but he also managed to show his sinister qualities, especially near the end. His character alone bumps this film a few spots higher on the list for me. I just wished that the rest of the film was as enjoyable as the scenes he was in. It's not as if the other characters were bad per se. Maureen O'Hara and Robert Newton did a good job, and Leslie Banks delivers a very different performance here than he did in The Man Who Knew Too Much. But the majority of the characters weren't interesting or memorable in the slightest, and it dealt with subject matters that didn't interest me. So Jamaica Inn wasn't great, but it still signifies a monumental moment in his career. His stock would reach incredible new heights immediately following this film. Also, poor Chadwick.
Loot! Butcher and baker, you old numbskull!
Number 34. Blackmail. Even though the film was originally shot as a silent film, changes were made and The Blackmail became Hitchcock's first talking picture. And it's also renowned for being the first British talkie and the first successful European talkie. But regardless of the accolades, at the end of the day, Blackmail is still an early talkie, which means that it comes with a bunch of baggage, at least for modern audiences. Honestly, I found that early talkies aged even worse than silent films, because the added element of sound and the primitive use of it leads to a bunch of new distractions and immersion-breaking moments. The film has no background score of any sort. The audio of the dialogue was low quality and hard to understand sometimes, and there were still a few scenes in the sound version of Blackmail that were taken from the silent version of Blackmail. And I mean it literally. I'm talking about lips moving but no sound. The only thing that was missing were the intertitles. So that's not great, but fear not, because Blackmail is actually a very special film in my eyes, for one major reason. This was the first time that Hitchcock directed a scene that literally took my breath away. There is one single scene in this film that is incredible, which is the scene where Alice goes up to the artist's apartment and everything that transpires there. Everything about this scene, from the build-up, the pacing, the interplay between the characters, all the way to the moment where everything goes wrong and the aftermath, was superb. I was on the edge of my seat and I couldn't look away. The direction, the camera work, the performances, everything worked. And the first true magical moment of Hitchcock suspense was born. It's a scene that deserves a deep dive analysis. It does so many things right. It's unbelievable, which makes it much more of a shame to say that everything that follows this scene was pretty bad. The pacing falls off a cliff, the characters and the story just get stuck in one place, and worst of all, the blackmail itself, the title of the movie, that portion was really dull and uninteresting. He basically just gets her to buy him a cigar and that's it. Really? That was pretty weak. Sure, there's a nice little chase scene at the very end, but I was already checked out by then. I didn't really care. In short, Blackmail isn't a great movie. It starts slowly, it ends poorly, and it's littered with issues, but that one truly special scene manages to save this film and earn my recommendation. So check it out. Number 33. Murder. This was one of the best films to come out of Hitchcock's most turbulent and uneven period, the early 30s. Murder is a good old-fashioned murder mystery tale about a woman who's found next to a dead body and is accused and found guilty in court, only for one of the jurors to regret his decision to vote guilty and set off on his own private investigation in an attempt to discover the truth and prove the woman's innocence. The story was well constructed. It did a great job at giving you small bits of information and having them pay off later. For a story about murder, the tone was pretty laid back. The pace was leisurely, and it even had the classic Hitchcock dark sense of humor. The main character, Sir John, was fairly charming and charismatic. Nothing too special, but he did the job well enough. There were a bunch of great scenes in this film, from the jurors deliberating about the verdict, to Sir John trying to bait the truth out of his prime suspect by pretending it's an audition for a play. But probably the best thing I can say about it is that it was easily the most competently shot film of Hitchcock's filmography up to that point. The camera work was active and filled with movement, which helped the film feel less static and more lively than other films of that era. Of course, the film is still very clunky and hasn't aged all that well in technical terms. Also, the ending didn't really help the film. At first, it looked like the ending was gonna be great. But then one reading of a letter ties everything up in a bow way too nicely. It was the first instance of a character explaining everything to the audience in a very obvious and forced way. Those who've seen Psycho would know exactly what I'm talking about. To sum up, Murder is pretty good. Nothing too special on its own, but it serves as a major early highlight of Hitchcock's career. Number 32. To Catch a Thief. I'm probably gonna sound harsh while talking about this film, but it can't be helped. To Catch a Thief was a pretty big disappointment for me. My expectations were high, mostly due to its two leading stars, and also because it's a 50s Hitchcock movie, the first one on the list. The 50s was easily Hitchcock's strongest decade of his career. I mean, spoiler alert, but half of the top 10 movies on this list are from the 50s. But I guess on every list, something has to be last, and when it comes to Hitchcock's films from the 50s, To Catch a Thief is my least favorite. Now, I'm not saying this film is bad, I just found it to be very underwhelming. The story was very straightforward and not as interesting or engrossing as I hoped. The mystery element wasn't great, the suspenseful scenes felt way clunkier than usual, and the twist reveal at the end fell completely flat. Usually a twist reveal is like a big deal, you know? But here it was like, whatever. Cary Grant and Grace Kelly are the leads in this film, and they do a good job overall, but their performances were the weakest they ever gave for a Hitchcock film. You understand what I mean when I said this was disappointing? Still, I will give the film some credit. At least we get to see Grace Kelly in a swimsuit, so it gets some points for that. The film also has some entertaining and funny moments in it, my favorite one being this moment at a funeral.
Murderer!
I also fairly enjoyed the French scenery and the film's color palette. Along with the costumes and the set design, To Catch a Thief is definitely one of Hitchcock's most vibrant films, and one that is very enjoyable to look at. Too bad the film lacks the substance to go along with the style. So yeah, To Catch a Thief was kinda lackluster, but it did have its fun parts. Number 31. Young and Innocent. One of Hitchcock's most light-hearted films, I enjoyed Young and Innocent enough, even though it's clearly one of his more generic examples of the mistaken identity trope. What carries this film over the line are the likable leads and their romantic chemistry. Derek de Marnay was charming and charismatic as a man who's wrongfully accused of murder, but Nova Pilbeam was the star of the show. She also starred as the girl from The Man Who Knew Too Much 3 years prior, but here she really came into her own as an actress. She was very sweet and relatable as a young woman who finds herself between a rock and a hard place. The adventure these two characters go on was pretty tame, but it still had some highlights. Not a lot of directors are able to inject suspense into a birthday party, but they don't call Hitchcock a master for nothing. Now, even though the film was good, it had a few niggling issues. For example, I don't think it was Hitchcock's best work on a technical level. The film has an above-average amount of shots that just don't look that good or convincing, the worst of which being this crane shot. Right off the bat, the shot looks like a miniature, but the ending seals the deal. Oh my goodness, the dolls here are so obvious. Talk about distracting. Near the end of the film, we get an actual crane shot in a ballroom. Now this is what I'm talking about. This magnificent shot was very impressive for the time. Too bad it has to be completely spoiled by blackface. Whatever. In short, Young and Innocent isn't one of Hitchcock's greatest achievements, and it has its fair share of issues, but likable characters, a fun and light-hearted mystery adventure, and a few clever plot twists help the film move higher up on the list. Number 30. Secret Agent. This is another one of Hitchcock's British films, this one being an espionage thriller about two secret agents undercover as a married couple, trying to track down an enemy agent. All the while, their fake romance becomes more and more real. This is a fairly enjoyable hidden gem, even if it doesn't compare to Hitchcock's true classics. It benefits greatly from the inclusion of Peter Lorre as the eccentric and slightly diabolical General... what was her name again?
General Pompilio Montezuma della Briglia del Conde de Lambeau.
Yeah, that. Peter Lorre was one of the most talented and ahead of his time actors of the 30s, and here he totally steals the show. The two leads weren't the greatest I've ever seen, but John Gielgud and Madeleine Carroll deliver adequate performances, with the relationship specifically being pretty well developed. It's one of Hitchcock's funniest early films, with quick talking, witty characters, and a fair few politically incorrect moments that might not fly well today, but I personally quite like. Also, the film has a twist ending, a fairly common aspect in a lot of Hitchcock's films. In here, the twist was fairly predictable, nothing earth-shattering or anything, but I liked it anyway. It was executed effectively enough. As far as suspense goes, it's clear that Hitchcock, even at an early stage in his career, knew his stuff very well. Two scenes stand out, the first being a hike up a mountain, and the second being the final confrontation, on a train. These trains just keep popping up everywhere on this list. Curious. Anyway, Secret Agent delivers where it counts, and I recommend you check it out if you can. Number 29. The Lodger, a story of the London fog. To put it mildly, Hitchcock's contribution to silent cinema hasn't been the most remarkable. But if I had to choose the single best silent film he's made, it's this one. The Lodger is easily the most suspenseful, tense, and darkly comical of his silent films, and the one that feels the most Hitchcockian. It's a simple story about a serial killer on the loose, who only murders women with golden curls, and about the efforts to identify him and bring him to justice. You got mystery, suspense, action, romance, laughs. It's a Hitchcock film. Pure and simple. You really feel it throughout this movie, that even though it was only his third feature, and second to have survived, it was made by a man who really knows what he's doing. It's very atmospheric, with some very fantastic shots for a silent film. The shot where the titular lodger enters the building is really cool. It has an instantly iconic feel to it. I also liked this shot from underneath the floor where we see him pacing around his room. It's some great visual experimentation, and it really adds to the watchability. The characters here were also way more memorable than the ones in Hitchcock's other early work. Ivor Novello was great as the lodger, exhibiting some great facial expressions and a fantastic screen presence, and Daisy was particularly the prototype for the now famous Hitchcock blonde trope. She was charming and funny. June Tripp did an excellent job as well. The mystery element in the film is also very strong. The lodger keeps acting in a suspicious manner, and we keep trying to figure out if he's the killer or not, which adds a great layer of tension, especially when he's alone with Daisy. But at the same time, the lodger is also really charming, and Daisy seems to really like him. So even though we suspect him, we still feel for him. And when the other people in the building begin to suspect him and treat him poorly, we find ourselves rooting for him. It's really great stuff. These are the reasons why it's his best silent film. The Lodger has a great story, great characters, it looks great, and it explores a bunch of themes that would later become staples of Hitchcock's most notable work. Even though it's technically not his first film, The Lodger is arguably the film where the master of suspense was born. Number 28. Waltzes from Vienna. This was a very pleasant surprise. I enjoyed this film much more than I thought I would. It's not a great film or anything, the acting was nothing special, the story was nothing special, the visuals were nothing special, but it was very fun and enjoyable, and that's what matters at the end. I actually really liked the story, the characters, and the tone of the film. It's a biographical comedy drama based on a play about the composer Johann Strauss, and it tells the story of how he wrote his greatest composition, the song The Blue Danube, which everybody knows. It's the song that I'm playing right now. Never expected Hitchcock to make a film about music, but he did a great job with this one. I loved the scene where he's at the bakery and we see him come up with the idea for the composition on the spot. That was creative, and also pretty funny. And the scene at the end where he plays the song in front of a crowd for the first time was cathartic and effective. I loved the characters. Johann Strauss was a compelling protagonist, stuck in a conflict between his love and his art. His love, Resi, was kind of annoying, and I didn't like the fact that she kept trying to hold him back and make him choose between herself and his music, but by the end of the film she does come around, which I really liked. I understand that in the play the film is based on, they end up not being together, so I think changing the ending made the film better. The rest of the characters were good too, but I especially loved Gustav, mostly because of how funny, pompous, and ridiculous he was. He stole the show every time he showed up, and he wasn't the only source of laughs this film had. There were a bunch of really great zingers here that genuinely made me laugh out loud. This is one of the least talked about Hitchcock films out there, so I consider it an honor to recommend this hidden gem to all of you wonderful people. Check it out and enjoy. Number 27. Family Plot. In a stroke of luck, Hitchcock's final film ends up dead center of the list. He's made exactly 26 films that I think are better than Family Plot, and he's made exactly 26 films that I think are worse. 3 cheers for symmetry. The film is a comedy thriller with a bonkers story. It follows a woman pretending to be a medium, played by Barbara Harris, and her taxi driver boyfriend, played by Bruce Dern. One day, she receives a request from a wealthy old woman to find her family's heir who went missing when he was a baby in order for him to inherit her estate. In exchange, she will give her $10,000. So our couple goes on the search, not realizing that the man they're looking for is now a dangerous and sadistic jewel thief. So when he realizes that somebody's looking for him, he thinks that they're trying to catch him, so he decides to kill them. The joke being that he should actually want to be found, because if he is, he'll get a ton of money. It's a pretty crazy setup for a story, but that's basically the only noteworthy thing about it. The movie itself was nothing too special, but it was enjoyable enough and it had its moments. It's one of the funnier Hitchcock films out there, with a few scenes that legitimately made me laugh out loud. The actors did a serviceable job in the roles, and I cared about what was going on. It did irk me a bit how unremarkable the cinematography was here. The glory days of Vertigo and North by Northwest were truly dead and buried by this point, but at least the film feels like the people who made it had a good time. Even though Family Plot wasn't a great film, it was still fun, funny, with an intriguing mystery element, and way more swearing than I expected. I also think it has the perfect final shot. This movie wasn't intended to be Hitchcock's swan song, but it ended up being the case, and as luck would have it, we were treated with a fitting send-off to a cinematic legend. Number 26. Marnie. If you thought casting an ex-Bond girl in Topaz was neat, how about casting James Bond himself? That's right, Marnie stars Sean Connery, fresh off of starring in the first 3 James Bond films. It also stars Tippi Hedren once again in the titular role, 1 year after she made a big splash in The Birds. This is arguably the highest profile leading duo in Hitchcock's entire filmography. The film itself, however, signaled the beginning of the end for Hitchcock's cinematic domination. Marnie definitely has some things going for it, but as a whole, it was a marked step down from what came before, at least in my opinion. Still, there were a bunch of things that I really liked about this movie. Sean Connery was excellent here, delivering a more grounded and slightly intimidating performance as opposed to his portrayal of James Bond. The film has 2 major elements to it. One of them is a psychological mystery angle revolving around Marnie's manic behavior every time she sees the color red. Throughout the entire film, you wonder what it is about that color that makes her act in that way. And in my opinion, the reveal at the end was very powerful and well executed. It was easily the strongest aspect of the film for me. The problem is that there were also a bunch of things that I didn't like here. The second element the film has is the relationship between the 2 main characters, as well as Marnie's constant attempt to escape the law. That aspect was rather weak in my opinion. I didn't really care for their relationship, and I didn't really care whether the police caught her or not. The scenes focusing on her run from the law were pretty boring. Way less interesting than the scenes focusing on her hysteria. Other than that, Tippi Hedren's performance here was far too over the top, and much weaker than her performance in The Birds. Most of the other side characters felt one-dimensional and dull, and there was one scene in particular that was kind of uncomfortable, and not in the best way. All of these issues hinder Marnie's spot on the list, but I don't want to seem too harsh on the film. I still think the film is good overall, even if it wasn't great. At the end of the day, Sean Connery and the psychological mystery the film has is more than enough to make this film worth your time. Number 25. The Trouble with Harry. Hitchcock always had a dark sense of humor, but he takes it to another level with The Trouble with Harry. It's about a man who accidentally shoots a man named Harry out in the woods, only to realize that pretty much nobody cares. On the contrary, most people are actually happy this man is dead. The trouble with him, however, is that the law still exists, so the people of the town need to figure out what to do with our recently deceased nuisance. I really like the look of the film. The colors are vibrant and the cinematography was picturesque. The cast of the film has a few notable mentions. The main character is played by Edmund Gwenn, who you may remember from The Skin Game, Waltzes from Vienna, and Foreign Correspondent, which we'll get to later. This was easily his most substantial role in a Hitchcock film, and I enjoyed his sympathetic and likable performance. John Forsythe does a great job as a painter who falls in love with Harry's wife, now widow, who's played by Shirley MacLaine in her feature film debut. That's pretty cool. A true living legend, she would go on to have a very successful career, starring in no less than 3 Best Picture winning films, and in The Trouble with Harry, she already showcased her talents. She was easily one of the highlights of the film for me. As a whole, the cast here was very good and I pretty much liked all of the characters. But the thing that would make or break the film for most people is the humor. So, is the film funny? I thought it was, but not as much as I would have liked. The main source of humor in the film comes from how nonchalantly the characters treat the situation and the fact that there's a dead body that they need to contend with. The first 10 minutes or so of the film were the funniest ones in my opinion, because we're treated to a sequence of each character finding the body and not caring even a little bit. That was pretty great, but the jokes started to wear thin as the film progressed. It was still funny on occasion, because the situation is very funny, but I hoped for a bit more creativity in the humor. So as a whole, The Trouble with Harry was okay. I applaud Hitchcock for trying something different with this film, and I think he did an admirable job. But I also think he was wise to stay away from pure comedies for the rest of his career. Number 24. The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1934. This was Hitchcock's first major hit, and after watching it, it's easy to see why. This film is a pretty major leap in comparison to what came before it, in terms of storytelling, technical proficiency, and engagement. Take notes, number 17. This is how you tell a story that is filled with mystery. The film starts by introducing us to the characters, letting us get to know them just enough, and only after that, it starts to pile on the thrills and the questions. A man gets shot out of nowhere, and before we know it, a married couple finds out that their daughter has been kidnapped and held hostage by a group of criminals planning a political assassination. And if they ever want to see their daughter again, they have to keep silent, not cooperate with the authorities, and stay out of their way. So, naturally, the father sets out on a mission to save her. The Man Who Knew Too Much is a fast-paced crime thriller filled with fast-talking dialogue and Hitchcock's trademark dark humor. It's not one of Hitchcock's greatest films, it'd go on to make much better ones in the future, but the film was brisk, exciting, and entertaining in its own right. The characters were likable and well written. The father especially impressed me with his quick thinking and fearless determination to rescue his daughter. It's pretty obvious why I liked him. Another highlight was Peter Lorre as the villain. This actor had a knack for playing creepy villains that are obsessed with kidnapping children. Not the typecast I would personally go for, but hey, to each their own. He did a great job. His mannerisms, his confidence, his sadistic nature, he was easily one of Hitchcock's best early villains. This is a film that feels like it was made by a confident filmmaker who hit his stride. It really is full throttle from start to finish, with a bunch of great moments, my favorite being a masterfully shot and edited concert scene that was very suspenseful. In short, The Man Who Knew Too Much is considered a milestone in Hitchcock's career for a reason. Number 23. Spellbound. I know it's just me, but every time I think of this film, I think of the Tigers of Pantang album of the same name. Pretty good album. Anyway, this is a weird movie. On the one hand, it does a bunch of things really well. The plot was very interesting. It goes in directions I didn't expect, and the mystery element was intriguing. Visually, the film was very impressive. The cinematography was great, and there were a bunch of sequences that really stood out, especially the scene where they kiss for the first time. And of course, the psychedelic and surrealist dream sequence designed by Salvador Dali himself. That moment was spectacular. I also liked some of the characters here, especially Dr. Brulov. That guy was based. So the film has a bunch of things going for it, and as a whole, I think the film is pretty good. With that being said though, this film is silly as fuck. It has a lot of unintentionally hilarious moments in it, so much so that it was hard for me to take the film seriously. The two lead actors, Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck, were serviceable in the film, but they also had multiple moments where their acting was pretty over the top and ridiculous. Bergman was melodramatic as hell, but Gregory Peck was way worse. A part of his character is that he exhibits a tense reaction every time he sees lines over a white background. Now, the mystery of what it means was done well, and when we figure things out, it's pretty satisfying. But man, those reactions were so stupid. He loses his temper and he even passes out on multiple occasions, and I laughed every single time. I mean, for crying out loud, he goes crazy when he sees lines. Oh look, here he goes, here he goes, here he goes, here he goes. Oh, lights out. Even the Academy Award-winning musical score made me chuckle a few times. All of these moments take away from the film, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think Spellbound is bad. I know a bunch of people hold this film in high regard, and I can see why. The visuals and the mystery really are impressive here and worth a watch. But for me, the silliness took over way too much. And as a result, I think Spellbound is good, but it could have been better. Number 22. Frenzy. Out of Hitchcock's final 5 films, Frenzy was easily the best one. It was the one film out of his latter-day output that felt most like he was back in his wheelhouse. After all, it's a thriller about a serial murderer on the loose, with our hero being falsely accused of the crime. That's right, this is the very last wrong man film Hitchcock has ever made. The dark sense of humor in this film is back with a vengeance, with a bunch of scenes that really push the boundaries of good taste. But the most noteworthy aspect of the film is its sexual and violent content. This is hands down the most graphic and explicit Hitchcock film ever made. The killer is a sexual sadist, and we get to see all the gruesome details of his perversion when he commits his violent murders. The direction in this film is really top-notch, and with clever writing, we get a bunch of effective and intriguing scenes. It felt like Hitchcock was reveling in his art once again here, after 2, arguably 3 films where it seemed like he wasn't fully in it. It was a real treat to see the master in form once again. It's not without its issues, of course. I felt like the main character wasn't the most likable, and the ending felt very rushed. Also, even though I enjoyed it quite a bit, I still don't think it's up to par with Hitchcock's earlier and better work. But with that being said, Frenzy was definitely the high point of the latter portion of his career. And more than anything, I'm just glad he managed to make one more very good film before the end of his life. Number 21. The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956. Yep, I prefer this version over the 1934 original, although not by much, and I think that might be a minority opinion. Even though the remake is the more critically acclaimed version of the 2 films, I think the 1934 version is a bit better than it is given credit for, while I think that the 1956 version isn't as good as some people think. Of course, I still think both films are good. By the way, from this point on, expect all of the films to be at least very good. Yeah, Hitchcock made a lot of really good films, you guys. We're not even in the top 20 yet. Anyway, The Man Who Knew Too Much follows pretty closely to the story of the original, but it also makes a bunch of changes. Some changes I felt were improvements, while others, not so much. The changes I liked was how this version puts a larger emphasis on the characters and their emotions. We get to know them more as people, and as a result, we care for them more. James Stewart does a good job here as usual, even though in my opinion this is the weakest of the 4 performances he gave in Hitchcock films. But it was still pretty good. On the other hand, the MVP of the film and the one who stole the show was Doris Day as his wife. Man, she was fantastic. She gets real emotional in this film, and her performance was extremely impressive. Also, I have to mention the song that she sings, Que Sera Sera. I knew the song prior, but I never knew that it was written especially for this film. It even won the Academy Award for Best Original Song, making this film a rare Academy Award-winning feature for Hitchcock. The song is of course excellent, but I also liked the part that it plays in the plot near the end. So all of these changes were good, but unfortunately, the film also makes a few errors. The biggest downgrade here in comparison with the original is that the original felt like it had a much greater sense of urgency. It had a much faster pace, while in this version, I felt like the characters were taking their time more, which felt wrong, considering, they're trying to rescue their kidnapped child. I also felt like the villains in the original versions were more intimidating. The villains here were much weaker, and that to me is a big detriment. In short, I feel like if you combine the best aspects of both versions, you get an all-time great Hitchcock film. As it stands, we're left with a couple of good but not great thrillers that you should definitely check out, with the remake being slightly better overall. Number 20. Foreign Correspondent. The film that kickstarts my top 20 is a classic wartime mystery thriller about a reporter who's sent to Europe in order to get the big juicy stories. This film is all about the characters and the crazy moments. The lead, played by Joel McCrea, is one of the most charming leads in all of Hitchcock's filmography. He was very likable, and I also really enjoyed his love interest, played by Lorraine Day. All the performances were top-notch in this film. It kind of felt like a compilation of past Hitchcock performances. You get Herbert Marshall, who played the lead in Murder, George Sanders, who was great in Rebecca, and even Edmund Gwynn, who was the best part of the Skin Game. All of them make appearances here, and they were all great. As for the story itself, it starts rather slowly, but it picks up after a surprisingly violent assassination scene that really took me off guard. This was the first of many great sequences the film has to offer. There's a good chase scene that leads to one of the most iconic scenes in the film involving windmills. The scene at the tower was very suspenseful and well executed, and the ending of the film involving a plane crash literally made my jaw drop. It was super impressive for its time, and in my opinion, it's worth the price of admission alone. Foreign Correspondent isn't a perfect film. The plot does feel like a mess at certain points, and the patriotic ending felt a bit ham-fisted, but the positives far outweigh the negatives here. It has great sequences, a charming romance, and even a good sense of humor. I highly enjoyed it, and I recommend it to anybody who hasn't seen it yet. Number 19. Sabotage. This is my third favorite British film Hitchcock's ever made, and it's a real special one at that. For starters, it opens with a definition. A thriller and an educational experience? Sign me up. But for real now, Sabotage is notable for being the film where Hitchcock allowed himself to fully let loose and not hold anything back. I mean, this film has serious balls. I'm of course referring to the most infamous scene in the film where a boy needs to carry a parcel to the center of town, unaware of the fact that he's actually carrying a bomb set to explode at 1:45. The tension in this scene is nerve-wracking, and after a solid 10 minutes of build-up and suspense, the bomb actually explodes, killing the child and a bus full of people. That's dark as fuck. Hitchcock isn't messing around with this one. But what I love about Sabotage is that the film is great all round, not just because of the one scene. The story about a woman who doesn't know that her husband is a terrorist is one of the most serious, intriguing, and suspenseful Hitchcock's ever told. Sylvia Sidney, who most people probably know from her small role in Beetlejuice, was excellent as the leading lady, and Oscar Homolka delivers a nuanced, layered, and conflicted performance as her terrorist husband. It's a film filled with intrigue, scheming, tragedy, and dark humor. Pretty much everything I want in a Hitchcock film. It's an early standard bearer for Hitchcock's entire career. The film also exhibits some neat technical skills, especially in its editing, which was some of the best editing I've seen in a film from the 30s. The way the film gives us a glimpse into the characters' minds through the editing was pretty special, at least for an early film such as this. It also has a scene where we see a small snippet from an actual Walt Disney cartoon, with the man himself getting a mention during the opening credits. Another small bit of trivia that makes Sabotage just a tad more special than other Hitchcock films from the same period. Sabotage was an excellent thriller that is able to hold its own even against Hitchcock's later classics. Number 18. I Confess. Montgomery Clift plays Father Logan, a priest who receives a confession from the church's caretaker that he murdered a man he was trying to rob, and now, because of the seal of confession, he can't tell the authorities about it. Not only that, thanks to the fact that the priest and the murder victim knew each other and had issues between them, Father Logan becomes the primary suspect of the crime. I Confess is a great character-driven film that asks a bunch of interesting moral questions. The characters were well fleshed out and the performances were great. Montgomery Clift was excellent in the leading role, in spite of the well-known fact that Hitchcock had a rough time working with him. But still, the method actor managed to deliver a layered, subtle, and sometimes even powerful performance as a man stuck between his duties to the law and to his faith. Carl Malden plays the police inspector trying to solve the case, and he's awesome as always. Seriously, from A Streetcar Named Desire to On the Waterfront to Patton, I don't think I've ever seen this man deliver a bad performance, and this film is no exception. Anne Baxter was also great in the film, playing Father Logan's old girlfriend from before he became a priest. The film really makes you care for the characters here. You feel for all of them, even the less likable ones. As for my issues with the film, they're mostly technical in nature. This is the first Hitchcock film with a musical score during the majority of the runtime. Unfortunately, the score wasn't very good, and it was even distracting at certain instances. The film also relies on flashbacks a bit too much in my opinion, which hurts the pacing. What I did like though was the look of the film. It had a heavy noirish atmosphere with dark shadows that really sucked me in and allowed me to forget about some of the shortcomings. In short, even though I thought the plot wasn't as elegantly presented here as in other Hitchcock films, I still think I Confess is a very good movie, fully deserving of a top 20 finish on my list. Number 17. Lifeboat. It's always impressive when a film takes place in only one setting, but it still manages to keep you invested and engaged all the way through. And Lifeboat does exactly that. I didn't know anything about the film going in. All I knew was that the film was gonna be about a bunch of people stuck on a lifeboat. What I didn't anticipate was that the film would take place during World War II. The lifeboat would belong to a military ship that was sunk by a German U-boat, and that one of the people that was stranded on the boat would be a Nazi that they saved from drowning. Now that's a recipe for an interesting film right there. The best thing about the film was the characters, easily. All of them were distinct, memorable, interesting, and they each had their own story to tell. My personal favorite was Kovac, who from the very beginning wanted to toss the Nazi scum overboard. And the most emotional and tragic character was probably Gus, who was injured in the initial blast and goes through hell in this film. Those were the standouts for me, but all the characters offered something to the plot. All the performances were great, their chemistry was spot on, and the relationships and dynamic kept changing and evolving throughout the duration. The film has some funny moments and some emotional moments, some suspenseful moments, and even some really dark moments that caught me off guard. The film explores a bunch of intriguing themes about society, morality, sacrifice, and trust, and it has plenty of powerful scenes that stick long in the memory. It's very well written, well directed, well paced, well shot, well edited. It's just a well-made film all round. The only negative thing I can say about it is that the visuals weren't as interesting as some other films of his, even though the film does its best to keep the visual variety up as much as possible. Also, the ending was kind of weak. But other than these two things, I don't have much bad to say about it. I wouldn't consider Lifeboat a masterpiece or one of the all-time greats, but for what it is, it's pretty damn good. Number 16. The Wrong Man. Yeah, there's actually a movie called The Wrong Man, the most complete embodiment of Hitchcock's most famous trope. Right off the bat, you can tell that this movie is gonna be special, because it opens with Alfred Hitchcock himself addressing the audience directly. The reason, of course, being that The Wrong Man is the only Hitchcock film that is based on a true story. And what a story it is. It's about a man who's wrongly identified as a criminal who robbed a bunch of stores in the area, and the film follows this man's journey to hell. We see everything he goes through, the terrible and humiliating treatment he receives from the police, getting locked up, losing his freedom and his ability to take care of his family, and the whole time, he's a completely innocent man, for crying out loud. The film really sells the injustice here. I was furious. I wanted to shout at the screen multiple times, it was that effective. The biggest reason why this film is is so good is because you really care about the characters here. Henry Fonda was excellent in this movie. He plays such a good-hearted and sympathetic character. He goes through so much pain, but he always thinks and cares about his family first, before himself. That character trait alone made me really, really like him. And of course, his family was also very relatable. Another great element of the film is Hitchcock's direction. The suspense is palpable here. I loved the scene where he's first misidentified. The panic and terror of the female employees when they mistakenly realize who Henry Fonda is was conveyed very effectively. I also loved how the cinematography was up close and personal throughout the entirety of the runtime. It really puts us where the character is at, and we feel everything he feels. It was really great. The Wrong Man is very emotional, well shot, well performed, and well written. It's an all-round well-made film. The only part that I didn't like was how near the end his wife kinda loses her mind and has to be put in a mental institution. It grinds the pacing to a halt, and it didn't really add much to the film. Yet another case of how films that are based on true stories often choose to be more accurate to real life at the film's overall expense. I think it was the wrong move, and in general, I think movies should concentrate on being good movies and not on being 100% factually accurate. But that's just my opinion, and the film is still powerful, well made, and great overall. Number 15. Suspicion. I highly enjoyed this movie. It tells the story of a woman who marries a charming gentleman, only to later discover that he's a pathological liar and he was dishonest with her from the moment they met. Her trust in him keeps going down until she reaches a point where she begins to suspect that he's not just a swindler and a crook, but also a murderer. The story in this film is excellent and it's expertly told. Twists are thrown at you left and right, and the plot takes multiple turns at exactly the right time. Cary Grant's performance here was great. His character was legitimately fascinating. It's impossible to tell the exact nature behind his lies. You don't know if he's truly nefarious or simply misguided, so you're on the edge of your seat throughout, trying to figure out the truth. There are some very suspenseful scenes in this film, especially near the end, where the tension is cranked way up and you get really worried for our leading lady. Speaking of, Joan Fontaine won an Oscar for her performance in this movie, which makes her the only actress to ever win an acting Oscar for a Hitchcock film. Her performance was great as well, endlessly relatable and caring. You root for her every step of the way. Visually, the film is really well shot, with a few creative camera movements and angles that spice things up every once in a while. I really liked the Scrabble scene and the use of editing there, and I also really liked the way this glass looks. Hitchcock can find a way to make even the most common and unremarkable things feel menacing. I love it. So the film is really, really good. The characters are great, including the side characters, the story is excellent, and the visuals are good. So why isn't this film higher? Well, it's because of one simple reason. The ending sucks. Suspicion has a notoriously divisive ending that you either love or hate. I'm in the latter camp. It felt way too rushed, way too abrupt, and way too anticlimactic. I know that this film suffered from some studio meddling, so maybe that's why the ending turned out this way, but regardless, the ending is a massive stain on an otherwise great film, which is a damn shame. Still, I recommend people check it out. Even with a bad ending, I still think the film is a very good time. Number 14. Stage Fright. This is one of Hitchcock's most underrated films, in my opinion, and I think it deserves way more love than it gets. The story is about a young actress who tries to help her friend/her crush after he is accused of murdering the husband of an older, more esteemed actress. She suspects the older actress was the one who murdered her own husband, so she goes undercover as her helper in order to figure out the truth. All the while, she gets entangled with the detective that was assigned to the case. The plot is one of the more complicated ones of Hitchcock's filmography, thanks to the multitude of moving parts, character motivations, and overlapping relationships. But Hitchcock does an excellent job at keeping everything focused and avoiding what could have easily been a giant mess. All of the characters here are fantastic. I especially liked the lead in this film. Jane Wyman's performance was excellent. She's the same actress who played the girlfriend in The Lost Weekend, and just like in that movie, she plays a very sweet and likable character who's in love with a man who really doesn't deserve her. But in all seriousness, her character was actually very smart and competent, and she used her acting skills to her advantage on multiple different occasions. It was very fun to see. I also really liked her father. He supports her through thick and thin, no matter what, and he's a major source of the comedy that's in the film. Yeah, stage fright was also very funny, which is another big strength. Marlene Dietrich plays a prominent role in the film, and she also did a great job. All of the characters have a purpose and serve their parts well, and none of them felt out of place or unnecessary. It helped the viewing experience immensely. The last thing I'll say is that the ending of the film is legitimately one of the most suspenseful Hitchcock moments of all time. So Stage Fright checks both boxes. It's both funny and suspenseful, tense and entertaining in equal measure. Stage Fright truly is an underrated gem. Number 13. Shadow of a Doubt. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I watched this film a long while back, and I had very fond memories of it. But after watching it again, I have to admit, it's not as good as I remembered. It wasn't as impactful or as effective as I felt it would be, which was a slight disappointment. But with that being said, I still really enjoyed Shadow of a Doubt. I think it's a great film, with a great story, and most of all, great characters. I'm not kidding, I love the family in this movie, each and every single one of them. I loved the little girl and her in-your-face attitude. I loved the overly trusting mother. I loved the father who has multiple conversations with a family friend where they discuss how they would murder each other if they could. Those scenes cracked me up and were one of the highlights of the film. And above all, I loved Charlie, played by Theresa Wright. Every single film where Theresa Wright shows up, she's the best thing about it, and this film is no exception. She was fantastic as a girl who's very fond of her uncle, only to figure out that he may very well be a murderer on the loose, and it devastates her. Uncle Charlie was actually the worst thing about the film in my opinion. At the beginning of the film, you're not supposed to know if Uncle Charlie is a bad man or not. So when you discover the truth, it's supposed to be this big revelation. But Joseph Cotton's performance was so obviously shady that it actually served the opposite effect and sucked out all of the tension. The realization that he is in fact a murderer was hardly a surprise. I mean, just look at him. That guy is clearly messed up in the head. So that was a slight flaw for me, but from the moment the truth is revealed, all of a sudden the film gets really suspenseful. So as a whole, I really liked the film. It's very funny, it's entertaining, it's never dull, and the characters were some of the best in Hitchcock's filmography. It is yet another classic from the master himself. Number 12. The 39 Steps. My second favorite British Hitchcock film. This was the movie where the world was starting to take notice, and it began to be evident that this director was gonna be something truly special. This wasn't the first mistaken identity film Hitchcock's made, but it does feel like the Goldfinger of that specific Hitchcock trope. Sure, it wasn't the first, but here the formula was perfected. The story was very intriguing, and the plot flowed well from scene to scene with a brisk pace and layers of mystery being added on top of one another constantly. It was very entertaining, and there was never a dull moment. The protagonist was very charming and likable, and I loved how resourceful he was. He finds himself in situations that are less than ideal. The film keeps introducing new characters and situations, and keeps throwing new perils at our hero, but he manages to keep figuring out new ways to deal with them. I also loved the Hitchcock blonde in this film, played by Madeleine Carroll, who also played in Secret Agent. I loved the scene where she's introduced. Our protagonist is trying to escape the cops on a train, so he goes for the oldest trick in the book. Kiss a random stranger so the cops look away. Only here, it backfires because after he apologizes and explains the situation to her, she calls the cops on him anyway. A nice subversion of expectations there. Speaking of, that train scene is one of Hitchcock's best train scenes. Definitely top 5. Maybe I should do top 10 Hitchcock train scenes. That's not a bad idea for a video. Anyway, I digress. Visually, the film looks great. The atmosphere was wonderful, especially during the scenes with the mountains and the fog. The film boasts some audacious cinematography for its time. I especially liked this transition while they were in the car. I didn't know films of the 30s could do that. It feels like it's something out of Spielberg's playbook, not Hitchcock, but there you go. There's plenty of wit and quirk, and I loved the confidence the film conveys. In short, The 39 Steps is a lot of things, but most importantly of all, it's just a fun watch. Number 11. The Lady Vanishes. Just missing out on my top 10 is The Lady Vanishes, which is comfortably my favorite British motion picture Hitchcock has made, before taking his career to Hollywood and achieving worldwide recognition. The Lady Vanishes is a comedic thriller about a woman who boards a train with an elderly lady, but after waking up from a small nap, she realizes that her companion has disappeared. What's even more troubling is that the other passengers on the train insist that she was all alone the entire time. Pretty spooky stuff. So now it's up to her to solve this mystery and figure out what's going on. What makes this film so great is how the film handles its central mystery. It's woven into the plot so elegantly and subtly that before you even realize it, boom, it hits you and the film takes a turn. The story has many twists and turns that you don't see coming, with a bunch of sequences that actually blew my mind. There's a specific scene with a window that had me on the edge of my seat. The film shows the audience a small piece of very crucial information, even though the characters themselves aren't aware of it. So you're waiting anxiously for them to just turn their heads. Look, don't you see? It's so well executed. It was fantastic. The entire film was actually really well executed. It was well shot, well edited, and the script was sharp and well written. I loved the characters in the film. Their personalities were varied, they were all interesting, and they all served their purpose. Margaret Lockwood did an excellent job in the leading role. She was headstrong and determined to figure out the truth, even though almost nobody on the train actually believes her. Michael Redgrave as Gilbert, a passenger that helps her out, was also fantastic. Remarkable even, considering it was his debut film performance. Their chemistry and interactions throughout the film were the major source of the comedy. The film was really funny and really fun, but it still managed to balance the humor while maintaining a suspenseful and sinister undertone. That made The Lady Vanishes both a hilarious and fun comedy and a supremely crafted, suspenseful, and effective mystery thriller. It was really impressive and I enjoyed it immensely. And even though I enjoyed and liked a fair few of Hitchcock's British films, this is probably the one that I'll go back to and rewatch the most. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is telling. And now, it's top 10 time. Number 10. Dial M for Murder. Kicking off the top 10 is a film that really impressed me with its cleverness and sophistication. Dial M for Murder is a very well-written thriller about a man who tries to have his wife murdered by hiring an assassin to do the deed, but after his attempt fails and she kills the assassin in self-defense, he quickly covers his tracks and pivots to trying to frame his wife for murder and send her to be executed. It stars Ray Milland, who won the Oscar for Best Actor in The Lost Weekend, Robert Cummings, who also played in Hitchcock's very own Saboteur, and of course, the star of the hour, the utterly stunning Grace Kelly. All the performances, especially Kelly's and Milland's, were fantastic, and a good thing too, because Dial M for Murder is a very dialogue-heavy film. It starts quite slow, with a lot of exposition dumps from the characters, but the further the film progresses, the faster, more interesting, and more suspenseful it becomes. The tension keeps building and building all the way to the finale, which is one of the best written, most satisfying, and expertly executed finales in Hitch's entire filmography. How good is it? Well, the revelation at the end really took me by surprise. I loved how the film always felt like it was one step ahead of me, made me feel like I was watching something that had a lot of thought put into it. I loved how the film was all about the preparations, the planning, and explaining all the little details. In general, the attention to detail in this movie is immense, from little character quirks like how we see Milland's character wipe off the assassin's fingerprints from the things he touched, to all the little details in the finale. I mean, that goddamn key. There were some things that the film does that didn't speak to me as much. Almost the entire film takes place in one location, and I don't think the film did too much with it. Also, it's a very minimalistic film in general, which could be a turnoff for some. But in my case, I found the writing to be so good that it didn't bother me. If you want an awesome thriller that will get the better of you, with a breathtaking final few minutes, then Dial M for Murder is the film for you. Number 9. Rope. A remarkable feat of technique and style. Rope tells the story of two friends who murder a man at their apartment, hide the body inside of a chest, turn it into a makeshift table, and then proceed to invite a bunch of friends for a party, all the while a dead body is hidden in the room, just waiting to be discovered. If this list was ranked based solely on how impressive the filmmaking on display is, then Rope would have ended up even higher, maybe even at number 1. This film is famous for its long takes and hidden cuts that make the film feel like one long, continuous shot. Or at least that's the impression I had coming into the film, but I was surprised to discover that the film has way more just plain obvious cuts than I thought it would have. I counted at least 3 or 4. Of course, this doesn't take away from the film at all. It's still supremely ambitious and ahead of its time, and something that only a master at the peak of his powers could pull off. I adore the look of the film, and the attention to detail is incredible. This is Hitchcock's first film in color, and it's gorgeous. I love how the story takes place in real time, and we see the sun go down steadily until, by the end, it's dark outside, and neon lights from the street shine into the room. When the camera moves, it shakes slightly, which actually adds to the charm. It was a steady reminder that we're watching something experimental that required a lot of creativity behind the scenes to execute correctly. As far as the visuals, the style, and the technical execution, the film is an absolute masterpiece. The other elements of the film, like the story and the characters, were also really good, just not as incredible as the technical aspects. I loved the characters in the film though, don't get me wrong. The performances, the dialogue, I loved it all. The characters have a bunch of philosophical conversations in the film about morality that are very engaging and well written. All the performances were great in the film. James Stewart was great, Farley Granger was great, John Chandler was great, but the best of the bunch has to be John Dahl as the psychopathic murderer Brandon, filled with charisma, confidence, and wit. He was the MVP of the film for sure. I thought the ending monologue by Jimmy Stewart was a bit on the nose, and when it's all said and done, if you judge the story by itself, there really isn't much there. It's a film that puts the emphasis way more on style than substance, definitely. But I still think it has just enough substance in it to make the experience worthwhile, even without the outstanding craftsmanship. So when you pile the style that is there on top of it, you get one of Hitchcock's most unique, special, and best films. Number 8. Rebecca. Rebecca. A true milestone for Hitchcock's career, if ever there was one. This is not only Hitchcock's first Hollywood production, it's also the only Hitchcock film to ever win Best Picture at the Oscars. And if you ask me, Rebecca is also one of his very best films in general. I've already made a video about it in my Best Picture series, so check it out if you want some extended thoughts. The only thing I will say here though is that after rewatching it again in preparation for this video, I believe that I didn't give it enough credit the last time I talked about it. It's a wonderfully gothic tale about romance, grief, and jealousy. It starts off slow, but the characters are incredibly interesting and relatable. Joan Fontaine especially was stellar in this movie. I loved her in Suspicion, but here I loved her even more. She was so warm and gentle, and she finds herself in a complicated situation, so you care about her a lot. The set design in the film is fantastic, especially the castle of Manderley. The attention to the little details is great here. I especially loved Rebecca's room. It tells a story with its details, and you can particularly picture who Rebecca was through her room. It's really fantastic stuff. The cinematography is eloquent. The lighting is tremendous. The film looks absolutely gorgeous. The musical score was great. The film is this close to being a masterpiece in my eyes. I still do believe that the film loses a bit of steam near the end, but for some reasons, this time it didn't bother me as much. The characters are so strong in this movie that they carry the entire thing. I loved the side characters, especially the devilish Mrs. Danvers, who was excellent serving as a foreboding presence in the film. George Sanders, who was also in Foreign Correspondent, does a great job here as well as Rebecca's cousin. I can continue even longer, but I think I made my point. Rebecca is one of Hitchcock's crowning achievements. A ghost story with no ghosts, only the ghosts of the past. Number 7. The Birds. I have a confession to make. For the longest time, I thought that The Birds was overrated. What? It's a horror movie? But it's not scary at all. Look at those bird attacks. They look so fake. This movie is dated and doesn't work anymore. That was my belief after watching it for the first time, years ago. But now, for this video, I saw the film a second time, and my opinion couldn't be more different. I still think the bird attacks don't look that great, that's true. That is the one major weakness the film has, and it's a noticeable issue during certain moments. But other than that, The Birds is close to flawless. It has terrific writing, wonderful dialogue, extremely likable characters, and excellent character interactions. The leading couple in this film are adorable. Tippi Hedren and Rod Taylor deliver lovely performances that made me fall in love with their characters and care about them immensely. This is one of, if not my favorite couple in all of Hitchcock's filmography, and they're in a movie about birds trying to kill people. How crazy is that? Jessica Tandy is also in the movie, and her character was great as well. I love how she starts out cold and bitter, but the more we see of her, the more we understand where she comes from, and she becomes just as relatable as the two main stars. That's excellent writing 101. I also very recently realized that the actress that played Rod Taylor's sister in the film is the same actress who plays the blonde chick in Alien. That's freaking insane. I love how the film explores super intriguing themes and mixes humor and suspense super effectively. There's a scene at a diner where the characters try to make sense of what's going on, and it's probably my favorite scene in the movie. We get multiple conflicting points of view from various different individuals, all the while a random drunk guy just keeps talking about the end of the world all the time. It was hilarious. But before you have time to breathe, the scene pivots into one of the biggest bird attacks in the entire film, and we get to see a person just combust right in front of our faces. Damn, The Birds is hardcore. And while sure, the bird attacks themselves don't look that great, the film has plenty of effective and suspenseful scenes regardless. There's the scene where Jessica Tandy finds a man with no eyes in his apartment, one of the biggest shocks the movie has. And of course, the playground scene is a masterclass in tension. One of the greatest scenes in thriller history, hands down. The Birds is a fantastic movie with great characters, great suspense, and an ending that will stick with you long after the credits roll. At the end of the day, Hitchcock took a ridiculous premise about birds trying to kill people and actually made it work, and that's very impressive indeed. I apologize for ever thinking this film wasn't great. It most certainly is. Number 6. North by Northwest. I'm willing to wager that out of all of the films in my top 10, this is the placement that will raise the most eyebrows, because I think most people would put North by Northwest even higher than where I put it. But to those people, I say, please, don't interpret this decision as me claiming this film to be overrated, because I'm not. North by Northwest is hands down one of Hitchcock's greatest cinematic achievements. It's one of his most iconic films, one of his most fun films, one of his most quotable films, and one of his most influential films of all time. You can find a lot of early James Bond in this movie, and it was made 3 years before Dr. No, the first James Bond film. So this film's classic status is not in dispute, not even remotely. The only very small issue I have with it is that I personally think it lacks a bit of depth, and it's a bit more straightforward and surface level than the really top Hitchcock movies that we'll get to later. But with that being said, the film's strengths are undeniable. The dialogue is so quirky and so well written, and the delivery is so filled with swagger and charisma that the film is just a blast all the way through. Cary Grant delivers a fantastic performance in this film, as a man mistaken both by the police for being a terrorist and by actual terrorists for being a secret government spy. That's right, it's the wrong men trope again, but in its final and ultimate form, the double wrong men trope. Lord have mercy. Cary Grant really oozes charm in this movie. He's impossible not to like. He's also hilarious and armed to the teeth with one-liners and quick comebacks to anything that is thrown at him. He is a juggernaut. I also really liked his love interest in the movie, the femme fatale Eve Kendall, played by Eva Marie Saint, who is still alive at the time of recording and is 100 years old. Wow. Her and Grant's chemistry was perfect in the movie, and I loved seeing them share the screen together. The film is filled to the brim with iconic moments, most notably the famous crop duster scene, which is a masterclass in how to build tension and suspense, and later ramp things up to an explosive climax. And also the finale at Mount Rushmore, which was like the ending of Saboteur on the Statue of Liberty, only bigger and better in every single way, and not unintentionally hilarious this time. It was a terrific way to end the film. I don't think I need to elaborate much more why this film is so great. There's never a dull moment throughout its entirety. It's a real old-school, funny and fun time from start to finish. What's not to love? Number 5. Notorious. For my money, this is Hitchcock's best film that isn't immediately recognizable or iconic. It's not as famous as his very biggest hits, but Notorious stands shoulder to shoulder with them, thanks to having a wonderful story and fantastic characters. For the two most important things a film can have, Notorious gets an A+. It's a spy thriller under the guise of a love triangle romance. Ingrid Bergman gives her best performance in a Hitchcock film, much better than the ones she gave in Spellbound and Under Capricorn, as the daughter of a German war criminal who's recruited by Cary Grant's suave and ice-cool secret agent to spy on a friend of her father's, a conspirator played by Claude Rains who's living in Brazil. The film follows the relationships between the three characters, as things become increasingly more tricky and suspenseful. The script of this film is airtight, with very well-written dialogue. The tension keeps piling up more and more as the film progresses, and you just can't look away. It's captivating all the way through. You really care for the characters in this film. Each and every one of them finds themselves between a rock and a hard place, between love and duty, and the drama is super effective and engrossing. I love the way the film handles subtext. Characters say one thing but mean something totally different, and the film conveys that perfectly. Notorious is dramatic, it's layered, it's intriguing, and the story keeps pushing the characters to their limits until it finally culminates in an ending that I can only describe as one of the best endings of any Hitchcock film. It puts the stamp on an incredibly well-made motion picture that's filled with sequences that leave you on the edge of your seat. And I didn't even mention the fantastic cinematography, the exquisite set design, and the wonderful musical score. I honestly can't do this film justice. It's just a supremely made romantic thriller with an absolutely killer ending. And you have to check it out for yourselves. Number 4. Strangers on a Train. This film is awesome. Strangers on a Train is one of the best, most iconic, and most well-written thrillers of all time. It tells the story of two strangers who meet on a train. Duh. After conversing a bit, they realize that each one of them has a person in their lives that is giving them a hard time. So one of the strangers, Bruno, played by Robert Walker, puts forth a crazy idea that each one of them will commit the other person's murder. The other stranger, played by Farley Granger, thinks it's crazy and doesn't want to go along with it. But things begin to spiral out of control when Bruno decides to move forward with his plan regardless. It's such a great concept for a movie. The story is perfect, and the execution is tremendous. The pacing is lightning quick, and the presentation is slick and precise. The entire movie is basically just a steady string of A+ sequences in quick succession, such as the opening, the murder, the tennis match, and the finale, just to name a few. Bruno is one of the greatest villains in cinema history, not just in Hitchcock's filmography. I'm not exaggerating. He was deliciously insane, uncannily sweet but ever so menacing. He's a lunatic, but he's so charming and charismatic that he's able to convince people that he's sane. Needless to say, Robert Walker did a fantastic job with his performance, and he lifts this film up towards masterpiece territory. The rest of the performances were great as well, and it helps that the script here is so good. The characters' motivations and traits are so well defined that it made it really easy to relate to them. I love how there are a bunch of lovely little character moments sprinkled throughout the film, and that the film takes its side characters very seriously. Literally all of the side characters in this film are fantastic, from Bruno's mom to Anne Morton, Farley Granger's love interest, and even Anne Morton's sister, who's played by Alfred Hitchcock's real-life daughter. She was great here. Everything is so good in this film, and I didn't even mention the cinematography. Holy cow! This film is incredibly well shot, with great use of shadows and superimposition that creates some truly legendary images. Almost every single scene has something going on in it, be it visually, performance-wise, or story-wise. This lends to an experience that is just a blast from beginning to end. Strangers on a Train is absolutely fantastic, and it deserves this very high placement on my list. Number 3. This is it. We've reached the top 3 greatest ever Hitchcock films. And these 3 films are pretty easy to predict. I think these 3 films are gonna be the top 3 for most people. The only question is, in which order? Well, all 3 of these are very close. They're not only my 3 favorite Hitchcock films of all time, but these 3 films are 3 of my all-time favorite films, period. So it was hard to choose. But for me, my number 3 is Vertigo, which is basically a masterpiece, let's face it. The only things that prevent it from becoming a 10 out of 10 film for me are the slightest of pacing issues and a few small nitpicks here and there with the story. But other than these very minor issues, this film is absolutely fantastic. If you ask me, the highs in this film are the highest Hitchcock has ever gotten as a director. What even is there to say about this film that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? It's just one of the best films ever made. It's Hitchcock's most visually stunning film, with great use of color, smooth cinematography, and some jaw-dropping experimental sequences. It's the film that basically created the Zolly, or dolly zoom, and it uses this unique camera movement to great effect in order to simulate John's fear of heights. The film is incredibly atmospheric. The music is freaking fantastic. The performances by James Stewart and Kim Novak are tremendous, and the story was fascinating, shocking, and genuinely heartbreaking, with characters that you really care for. And if that's not enough, it also has what is probably the greatest ending to any Hitchcock movie ever, and you know how much an ending affects my view on a film. Now, everything I just said is already enough to make Vertigo one of the greatest films ever made. But it doesn't stop there. The biggest reason why this film is so special is that it serves as a collage of Hitchcock's entire body of work, complete with subtle references to past films of his. There's an ominous scene with a painting, just like in Blackmail. There's the chilling presence of a dead woman, just like in Rebecca. There's a scene where a man falls from a high building, like in Foreign Correspondent. The character of Midge resembles the character Hitchcock's daughter plays in Strangers on a Train with her appearance, and those are just a few examples. It explores themes of obsession and morality. The story took a shocking turn near the middle that took me completely by surprise. All of this and more makes Vertigo a film unlike any other. It's a very special movie. It's unbelievably well executed. It's very emotionally engrossing. It's just flat out fantastic. And yet, there are 2 films that I like even more than this. So let's get to them. Number 2. Rear Window. This, right here, is what a 10 out of 10 movie looks like. Rear Window is one of those ever so rare masterpieces that works on every conceivable level. The reason why this edges Vertigo for me ever so slightly is that I found Rear Window to be more consistently enjoyable. While Vertigo has the highest highs of any Hitchcock film in my opinion, it also has a few moments here and there that aren't as spectacular. This makes Vertigo slightly uneven, while Rear Window, on the other hand, is consistently on a very high level all the way through, with 0 dips in quality. None. Nada. Zilch. I love how Rear Window is probably the most delightful movie about murder ever made. I mean, come on. For a film about such a serious and dark subject matter, it's just so much fun. It has some of the best written dialogue in film history. It was quirky, funny, engrossing, naturalistic, relatable. Every single scene in this film is intriguing thanks to the dialogue. Whether it's dialogue that moves the plot forward, or dialogue that explores a certain theme, or simply dialogue that fleshes out the characters and their relationships. I can listen to these characters talk to one another for hours. It's just so good. All of the performances in this movie are fantastic, and I do mean all of them. Grace Kelly is even better here than she was in Dial M for Murder. And her chemistry with James Stewart is so good that you forget that the two actors are like 20 years apart in age. I mean, what is she doing with him? He's so old. Thelma Ritter is terrific as the nurse, and she delivers some of the best lines in the entire movie. Needless to say, the character department is rock solid here. But this isn't what makes Rear Window so great. Oh no. It's all about the filmmaking on display. Hitchcock has made several films that take place in a single location, but Rear Window is the ultimate example of this. The single setting is used to the maximum effect possible, so much so that even though the camera doesn't leave the room for almost the entirety of the film, the cinematography and the set design still manage to build a convincing and detail-filled world for the story to take place in. The backyard is filled with characters that we get to see and know from afar, each of them distinct and memorable in their own way. It's really masterful stuff. One of the greatest single-location films ever made, for sure. The mystery and suspense element is top-notch as well. James Stewart is convinced that a murder took place in one of the neighboring apartments, but the film throws just enough twists and red herrings your way in order to make you question if there really was a murder at all. The fact that our heroes kind of want there to be a murder echoes our own sentiments. It's a part of Hitchcock's twisted and dark humor, and it also serves as a commentary on our voyeuristic society. In short, Rear Window delivers on both style and substance. It's a thought-provoking piece of art and a blast to watch all at the same time. It's his most well-written, well-crafted, introspective, and commentary-filled film. It's a masterpiece. It's a 10 out of 10, and it is easily the greatest film Alfred Hitchcock has ever made. Well, except for one. And my favorite Alfred Hitchcock film of all time is Psycho. Well, here it is. My favorite Hitchcock movie of all time. It might be the cliché choice, it might be the obvious choice, it might be the predictable choice. But it's also the correct choice. Psycho is Alfred Hitchcock's greatest achievement as a director. It was close between this and Rear Window, oh so very close. But at the end, Psycho wins out by a feather. There are plenty of reasons why Psycho is number one on this list. The first is just the fact that this film is supremely well made. It's gorgeously shot, expertly paced, wonderfully atmospheric. It's iconic on multiple levels. The sets are incredibly memorable. The music is just wow, and the performances are some of the best in Hitchcock's entire filmography. Anthony Perkins delivers what might just be the greatest performance in any Hitchcock movie ever. His character is so well written, so deeply layered, and the performance is complete with subtle mannerisms, facial expressions, and naturalistic line delivery. He's charming and sympathetic on the outside, yet he's disturbed and villainous on the inside. And throughout the film, he does some truly unspeakable things. Psycho is not for the faint of heart, and while sure, it is rather tame by modern standards, the directing leaves just the right amount of room for the imagination to fill the gaps and paint a complete picture that, when you truly think about it, is super disturbing and vile. Thanks to the writing and Anthony Perkins' performance, we get one of the greatest villains in cinema history. But he isn't the only great character here. Janet Leigh, who plays Marion Crane, is also fantastic. Even though she's very flawed as a person, the film manages to make the most out of her relatively small amount of screen time to really make you care and root for her. That way, when the infamous shower scene shows up, it's all the more tragic and shocking. Speaking of the shower scene, this takes me to the second reason why Psycho is number one, which is the fact that, to put it simply, it's the most suspenseful film the master of suspense has ever made. I'll repeat, it's the most suspenseful film the master of suspense has ever made. That one sentence says it all, really. The tension in this film builds from the very beginning until it gets to a point where it feels like the suspense is suffocating you. And it's not just the scenes you automatically think of, it's also the quieter scenes near the beginning. It's the scenes where Marianne is in her car being followed by a cop. It's the scenes where she just arrived at the Bates Motel and her conversations with Norman. It's the scenes that build up to the big reveal in the end. Psycho is a suspense palooza. It's a fantastic ride from start to finish, and it never lets up. And this brings me to the third and final reason why Psycho is number one on my list, which is the impact that this film has had on me personally. This is a very special film for me, because it basically kick-started my undying love for the medium. This was the first classic movie I've ever seen. It was the first black and white movie I've ever seen. It was the first Hitchcock film I've ever seen. And it was the first horror film I've ever seen. I was blessed to be able to see it without knowing anything about it in advance. So you can probably guess that it left a massive, massive impression on me. This is the film that made me fall in love with movies. And it's also the film that sparked my fascination with the horror genre in particular. This basically makes Psycho a milestone in my life. The impact this film had on me is unrivaled. Even after all I just said, I still feel like I'm not doing this film justice, so I'm just gonna say this. I believe that Psycho is taken for granted. When people think of Psycho, they probably think of the shower scene, the twist ending, maybe Anthony Perkins, and that's it. Everybody already knows it's a masterpiece, everybody already knows it's legendary, and they just leave it at that. If you're one of these people, I implore you, watch the film again. Even over 65 years later, this film still has the power to shock you and keep you on the absolute edge of your seat, clinging for breath. It's not just another classic movie. It's a cinematic landmark. It's a movie unlike any other. It's a work of art whose influence is still felt today. It's an experience I will never ever forget. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why Psycho is my number one favorite Alfred Hitchcock film of all time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Now it's your turn. How do you rank Alfred Hitchcock's filmography? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know which ranking video you'd like me to do next. I'm always interested in hearing your suggestions. Again, thank you all so much, and have a good one.